Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I hope you're enjoying the Web 3.0 conference. It's been a really great day already. Next up, we've got Greg Kuebler from SingularityNET. He's going to go into more depth with the user experience and dark patterns. So I won't take up too much of your time. I'm going to head backstage, and I'll see you in a bit.
Hey, Ray. I'm just going to post up the presentation link to the presentation I have here in case you guys want to download that, so for later reference. So it's in that chat there. So I guess we'll get started. Let's see here. I think I'll do a screen share real quick and get my presentation started. All right. Just one moment. Oh, wrong one. All right. Can everybody see the presentation? Assuming so. Maybe I should just do the PDF to make sure I feel worried. One more second. I'm going to do the PDF thing. All right. We're going to do a PDF. Preview slides. All right. So everybody should be able to see my screen. That's cool. Go down. So here's the abstract. Don't need that. You can do that. That's for a little bit later. So here, this is the outline. I'm going to do introduction, the beginning of dark patterns, human psychological factors, dark patterns, evolving definitions, how dark patterns are the W3, and what we can do. So a little bit about me. Here's a little bit about me. I'm a user experience designer with a computer engineering background. I've been in many different industries. From academia, I started off working in quantum physics with a bunch of physicists, and then in Colorado, and then I migrated over to New York, where I was working for Wall Street Journal and Dow Jones, building out trader platforms and doing R&D projects with them. And then I continued working with global agencies, doing fintech stuff, and then I moved to Korea, where I was working with deep tech stuff in Seoul and Daejeon. And now I work for SingularityNET. So at SingularityNET, I'm the head of UX at SingularityNET. And also I work on a lot of the spinoff and collaborations. And I'm currently based in Taiwan. SingularityNET is, I have teams all over the world, in India, Brazil, in Europe, and of course in other parts of Asia, Dubai, Russia, and lots of places in Europe. So I've been with SingularityNET for the past 3 years, doing a lot of cool projects, and we could talk a little bit more about that kind of stuff, some of the things I've discovered through there. But designing, being a UX designer, working on blockchain and AI projects is really quite a different kind of experience than maybe like working for media companies and some other fintech companies. So yeah, so we'll get started. That's a little bit about me. So yeah, what is the beginning of dark patterns? All right, it's hard to say exactly. I guess the best way to look at it is to think about where like emerging technologies intersected with certain kind of content or narrative mediums. So this led me to having a discussion with a good friend of mine from Wall Street Journal, and he's a good artist friend now in San Francisco. We were talking about this. He was talking about the pseudo events by Daniel Bornstein. And in this book, it's called The Image, The Guide to Pseudo Events in America. And what it's about, it's really interesting. He's a really cool book. You should check it out. He defines pseudo event as an ambiguous truth that appeals to people's desires to be informed. So he basically defined how celebrities emerge, like the modern day celebrity, how they emerge through media and news. And he also predicted fake news. and he coined the term of being famous for being or famous for being famous. So I was having discussion with my friend Greg, we were talking about like false realities and other things like metaverses, but then it made me realize that he mentioned something. Uh, Bornstein talked about like when black and white cinema first emerged. It was a new technology. It had a narrative medium where it was telling a story in the moving pictures, obviously silent movies. Think of these the black and white silent movies, and also included a mass audience. So what this created was this predicament, which is really kind of interesting. So here's a quote from the book that I'll be talking about, but essentially there was this company, the Biograph company. They basically were producing these silent movies, and they refused to give actors on-screen film credit. So basically, the audience didn't know who these actors were at all. Now you have to remember, there's theater and stuff. Everybody knew who theater actors were and all that. So the film studios didn't want to give them celebrity status because they didn't want to pay them higher salaries and give them credit. So they basically omitted that from that. But the people there's two users in this kind of experience. It's pretty much these actors and the audience. And the audience was demanding to figure out who these people were. Like, who's this girl? And this coined this term, biograph girl. So the public called her biograph girl. And then even the biograph company refused to tell. Like, people back then were writing to these studios and to the newspapers, like, who is this person? Please tell us. Please tell us. They refused, and they just said, well, it's biograph girl. So that's what, so they just called this person biograph girl. And this actually turned out to be Florence Lawrence and Mary Pickford, who you might recognize through some classic films. And they were basically the first movie stars. So this is like what I would call like the first, not maybe like a good example of emerging technology and the holders, the gatekeepers, the producers, the creators, basically trying to change it because they didn't want it to be like a previous like theater or anything. So they want to change it for more profit, for simply more profit. So they all got together and scammed or obscured their names and everything. So what's interesting, so I would say that's like a really interesting dark pattern. And this story gets a little crazier. So they didn't reveal the names of these actors, but this other company called the Independent Motion Pictures, IMP, basically lured this actor, the biograph girl, away and basically offered her, well, we'll tell you what her name is. But they did something, he was trying to do something good, but he also did something also very, in a weirdly way, sinister. He did a stunt where they basically said biograph girl was killed in a streetcar in New York. And then he placed ads in the newspaper to announce the real name and that it was a lie. So that was how they were just doing that to pump up their next movie with the biograph girl, which is also kind of weird, but it's an interesting little part of that story. So as I was saying, the early dark patterns is black and white cinema was really interesting because it was emerging and you got the content of the medium. And then you have this dark pattern where that occurred on a grand scale publicly. And it's really interesting. And then obviously in the pseudo events book, he was talking about this in the form of celebrities and fake news. So I thought that was a really good example to kind of get us started with what dark patterns kind of came from and stuff like that. So the next thing I want to talk about is we'll move on to the human psychology, the factors that contribute that we as humans are kind of have this natural dependency to do sometimes. So humans are kind of lazy with boring or overwhelmed with complex content. So we also often take as a, kind of the first human psychology point is, often take the path of least resistance, right? So in a product design, we would probably be taking, you design a system where it's that, that path, but humans would also take shortcuts because they, find these other ways. So we build barriers or different kind of things to block that path or maybe even redefine what the product does. But the idea is that humans always take the path of least resistance. That's one. It's a big one, classic one. And the other one is the default effect. So it's like the cognitive effort for humans to think. We prefer choosing default or what's normal. So in this classic example is an organ donor's defaults, right? So on the left, you have to, this is a study, a classic study that was done in Europe about organ donating, right? So on the left are the countries, the organ rates of donations where users had to opt in. So it's very low. Then versus you have to opt out, which is on the right in the blue. So obviously you see you have more organs available if you force your citizens to opt out of a system. So this is kind of interesting. So this is very clearly showing like, well, if it's there, we do it. If it's default, that's what we think is best. Even though in this case, obviously it's a good thing to have people donate their organs, but in this case, the choice was obscure. So that's a classic one. And then another human psychology is like the sunk cost fallacy. Like we keep doing something as long as we have invested money or effort in it, even if it harms ourselves, right? Like, so this is I pull this human psychology point out because it's like really interesting because this relates more to like the W3 and the crypto scene and why the users, freak out and do irrational things like this. The other one is pretty big. This one's more big in the fintech and gaming world, the scarcity effect, where if there's less of something, then the higher we value it. So like a common dark pattern would be like, oh, there's only one day left, and that encourages people to do an action, even if it's true or not. The last one I put in is the fear of missing out syndrome, and this is one that's very common with the crypto world and it's very and probably the most pervasive one that's going to affect a lot of the future of dark patterns is the apprehension of not knowing or missing out on information or events, experiences, or things that make life better, and follow up with compulsive behavior to maintain those social connections or just do it because everybody else is doing it. It's a little bit kind of related to the default effect to some degree, but this is a little bit more proactive. And more psychologically intense. So all these dark patterns feed off these human psychology points and exploit the fact that the users are content overloaded and they skim stuff that they're presented with. So what this causes is manipulative timing is the intersection point. So that's where your product experience is figuring out like, okay, they're ready for not knowing that this is coming. So you find that perfect point. So like signing up for a service or completing a purchase or getting something they're actually looking for, finding out what the friends have sent them. So this is not bad design. It's basically carefully crafted to interfere with your decision-making process. So they're not mistakes. And they're not lying per se, but they're doing it through deception. So it's not like propaganda, which could be a lie, but this is more about the deceptive nature of you have a choice, make a choice and do it under duress and then make a mistake that you might not want. So now I'm going to go into like dark patterns evolving definitions. Like they all kind of share this one commonality. It's basically to nudge the user to give up more than they realize through an action of accepting, doing, believing, or sharing that they wouldn't have otherwise done if the information was presented in a non-ambiguous and genuine fashion. So its core deception is misdirection perpetuated by the design and their networks. So that networks part is very kind of important for the Web3 and the future of stuff. So basically, you can sum it up, it's easy to get in. A dark pattern is easy to get in and hard to get out. And so the first definition, or this dark patterns, was coined by Harry Bernal, and he basically did that in 2010, which, not very long ago. And he runs a website about dark patterns to raise public awareness. And he now does expert witness stuff, which I guess is because of all the regulation that's kind of coming. So he's an interesting guy. He coined the term, and he basically went about assessing all the different kind of dark patterns. I think in the beginning he only had probably 9, but then he expanded it to like pretty much 13. So I'm not going to define all of these. Some of these you kind of know. So he was pulling these from what he was found from the e-commerce kind of experiences, but they're pretty good, but they also on an academic level, a little bit marketing style naming of these kind of things. I don't know if I would. Some of them are pretty clearly labeled, but then others like privacy zuckering. It's obviously very, very specific. Probably won't last over time too well. But you have like trick questions, big ones like Roach Motel, which makes it like the maze that's hard to get out, how to unsubscribe, kind of things like that. Confirm shaming, pretty much using like various marketing language to kind of make people feel bad in order to do, like, are you really going to go? All your friends are going to miss you, stuff like that. Yeah. So, but now he started with the e-commerce, but it's pretty much in everything from gaming to crypto. So we'll come back to that. And I really like Colin Gray's redefined definition, where he kind of broke it down into 5 things like nagging, obstruction, sneaking, interface interference, and force action. So, he coined these terms like 8 years later, and this was pretty good. I think it was a good adaptation. And then you come to today. Princeton University research has expanded the definition to 19 different factors. So you can read this paper right here. It's like an academic paper. It's pretty amazing, and it kind of follows the evolution of the definition pretty well. But if you want to, and I'm not going to go into like all the different definitions, but at the end of this, we're pretty much going to be defining like, well, the expansion of the definition will include like networks, where it's not necessarily the app or the people doing it's the people involved in the system. That's beyond just the creators of the app. But what's the point and why are they increasing? Well, that's pretty basic. It's because the technology is increasing. It's getting more pervasive. We got new technologies, the blockchain, AI, the gaming industry is expanding, AR, VR, whatever, fintech, more like tools. The banking industry is finally like figuring out how to make more apps to access your money and things like that. So we have pretty much the definition is evolving, and all these different dark patterns are increasing because just all the different technologies are coming. So I know it when I see it. It's a universal assessment criterion. And that's why it kind of makes it easy for Harry to do that. It was like, oh, I just go out there and see it. Because you see it. You've all seen these dark patterns. You all have tried to unsubscribe from something and found it nearly impossible. Yeah. So what about the Web3 dark patterns? Are they really different? Well, we'll see here. So let's go first with like, what is Web3 and what I see as the evolution of Web3. Now, in some ways, it won't be exclusive. The way I see it, Web3, we're not just going to hop into Web3 and everything is the way it's in theory was supposed to be. It's going to be amalgamation or a mixture between Web2 and Web3. So you're going to have decentralized and centralized things coexist together. So that's where all these different dark patterns are going to be kind of like together or merge or evolving with decentralized and centralized applications. So, you can hear other talks about, different definitions of Web3, but I really think the future is going to be like, you're going to have Google and even Twitter. Twitter is now trying to do like some Web3 stuff with their NFT stuff, right? For their avatars. And so you're going to see even like centralized companies try to play in the Web3 kind of world or aspect. So it's a mixture. So in theory, how does Web3 really works? Well, this is just for people who are not familiar with Web3, but the core technology is blockchain, of course. The goal is that your data is decentralized in a storage mechanism, not stored on private server farms necessarily. And the data would move through your digital ledgers and allow a transparent flow of data, so that wherever you go with social media, Twitter or TikTok or whatever, or your email, you would have like an accessible amount of data that you would probably allow the access to or not, right? And AI and machine learning would be used to limit the abuses for like bots, click farms, and bad actors. So that's That's what Web3 is. Now, with these Web3 transition gaps, like we're pretty much at the beginning of Web3. So blockchain is slow and infrastructure is still there. That theory of what Web3 is, we're far from that. So we have a lot of decentralized projects, and DAOs don't really start off decentralized. I mean, they're created by groups of designers and CEOs and executive people trying to build something. And a lot of times they don't become decentralized until much later, or, uh, and then when they do, the solutions they have aren't necessarily like, yes, you can vote, and that can prevent a lot of dark patterns, but also there's like who controls the questions, right, that you vote on. And so there's a lot of holes and a lot of things we need to solve with DAOs. Voting and governance problems, like even how to vote and scale issues and interaction models, right? Like we have these crypto whales that really affect how a voting result will actually happen. And you can change how you vote, but it's still kind of getting sorted out. And digital wallets still improving. They're not really super, uh, you know, great yet as far as the UX goes. There's the mobile parts of it aren't really there. Some have mobile apps, but they're just kind of they're not cross-functional. So we've got a long ways there. And we have another point is AI and machine learning are still kind of centralized by the big tech and governance. And then we also have public perception and education of Web3. So what that does is basically all the dark patterns that you see now will continue and expand, because Web3 is not like wants to be just as interactive as what Web2 is now. So it's not like we're going to drop all the crazy amount of functionality. It's more like we're just putting on the blockchain, but you're going to have more, and they're going to be expanding the interactions. When you expand the interactions, you're going to get more lee room for more and different dark patterns. All right, so Web3, are there going to be any new ones? Well, yeah, it's kind of like dark matter. You just can't really see it. And that's the scary part. So what I'm talking about is web patterns. UX designers always get the rap or get blamed like, well, you designed it, so you made it. But in the future, or now even, is you're going to see systematic AI and ML, machine learning algorithms that serve the dark patterns to individual consumers or specific groups. So that's kind of the scary part. Here, I'll give a. So basically, this is the biggest point, is the algorithm. So this is the change in the definition of dark patterns. For an algorithm, their goal is not to mislead you. It's to condition you or modify your behavior over a calculated time so that you take an action that doesn't align with your agenda. So again, this coming back to manipulative timing intersection has become more efficient and specific. I give you some 2.0 examples because we've detected those. In the Web3, the use of the AI is not necessarily hasn't been developed completely, but you see in ad algorithms that Google does, airline algorithmic pricing. Like airlines changing the price. Like it's not like a store automatically. If you go in a real store, your products, when you select a product, they don't, all of the ones on the shelf don't just suddenly disappear and rearrange. But airlines have been doing this algorithmic repricing of things, autoplay algorithms. So I'll go into an example of ones like that's going on right now. It's like YouTube Premium. I don't know if you've noticed, but they've been serving these interface interference, basically like the one on the left here. It's like, try YouTube, blah, blah, blah. It's not just one simple thing. It's they have a whole toolbox of these, but they figured out how to like deliver it in different times of your interaction with it. And it's not being done by a human. It's being automated. It's being like done by the machine learning to figure out when is the best time to convert you. And here's an example of how it would probably work, or how it, in theory works, because I don't work for Google. I don't, know exactly how they're doing it, but they're doing something of this nature. So they collect your data that from you, like user A, and you avoided signups and hooks. And then they compare that to other users who did convert in a similar fashion eventually. And what was the best timing and the mechanic to interfere? Was it this ad, or was it like it right after the autoplay did a few different videos of different kind of things? So basically what they're doing is comparing you and your patterns against some other people, and then delivering the patterns specifically to you. So they compare this group with other groups, converting indicators with as little friction as possible. So they have time. They have a lot of time to figure out what's, like I said, like the algorithm that's about. It's a slow game for them, but it's going to be a successful one, and they'll get people that probably would never have converted, but if you wear them down long enough and get in their heads, essentially, you can figure out a way. So they basically create a new group of people who look and behave like you, and then target all the YouTubes that haven't converted that look like you, and then improve the algorithm as it does. And for Google, they can use other applications like your locations. There's an article here. If you download the PDF, there's a good link. It's like why Google is in deep trouble. This just came out this week. It's really interesting about why Google is in trouble for tracking your dark patterns. Well, they're tracking it so that they can figure out what where your weakness is, where you are, and how get a better context of you, much more so than a human can. All right, so now let's go into dark patterns of crypto. All right. So you'll see the most commons that you'll find in online gaming. So online gaming is more or less playing by appointment, grinding, artificial scarcity, play to skip, pay to win. Pay to skip or pay to win. Social pyramid schemes, social obligation, friend spam, endowed value, endowed progress, illusions of control, and reciprocity. So I'll give an example of one is force action. I'm just going to highlight the ones that I feel like are going to be like the most, they're kind of being used now, and they're going to be continued in more aggressive formats. So force action. So this is like granting action or function or a resource in exchange for performing a certain action. Like you're being rewarded for logging into the platform every day, or if you miss a day, you lose something, or you're being rewarded for giving your attention to something like an ad or playing a game or, buying a crypto or something. So this is not a confirmed example, but this is one that the community is very watching and is very concerned about, because I don't know if you heard about this, is Pi Network. So they're another digital currency for regular individuals that you can mine on your mobile phone. But the problem is they're not really showing proof of work, so there's no real value yet. So it's considered a weird kind of scam. But they're relying on this very specific pattern called the force action, right? So they're basically really encouraging that you log in every day and click just to get a currency, but it's not really mining that I can tell. And the blockchain, they're supposed to introduce it to the mainnet now, but I think that's after the past year of everybody. I got duped into this. I downloaded this app. Some Silicon Valley VC sent me, he's like, hey, this is a cool thing, and I downloaded it. I checked it out. I thought the interface was cool, but then I realized it's just a stupid loop, and they're doing the bait and switch dark pattern eventually, or it's kind of up in the air. They also rely on inviting by more. You only get better performance or better amount of coins when you invite more users to the platform. So it's a multi-level marketing one. So that's a good segue right into the next biggest one. So that one is actually doing both. So this one is like network marketing and friend spam. So this is like the multi-level marketing. It's like go back, a lot of cryptos or Web3 or even a lot of Web2 technologies. They'll have the ambassador programs where you're supposed to recruit your families and friends to do something. And this causes the victims to stick with the product longer because they don't want to feel ashamed that they're disappointing the friend that invited them, or vice versa, the friend who originally invited them doesn't want to stop because they don't want to look like, even though they lost belief into the app. Fake news, conspiracy, false impersonations. You're going to see a lot of this in the crypto scene. I'm kind of putting these a little bit all together, and fake social proof, false scarcity. So this is basically saying false scarcity is just more or less putting a fake number of things to encourage that the users, or that they have value. There's a lot of users using this already. And especially with all these crypto projects, they want adoption and they need interaction, or for these governance to show that there's actual voting happening by not just the crypto whales, but like lots of different people. So a big example for this one, it's a classic one, but it's really interesting. If you haven't heard about it, it's the OneCoin scandal. It's pretty much kind of utilizing this digital. It utilizes every dark pattern out there, but it's deployed to network marketing to recruit friends. Basically became a cult. And there's a link down here to the BBC podcast, which is really cool. It's a long form investigation they did, but basically they didn't really have a real blockchain, and they didn't do real audits, or they did audits, but they lied about it. And they collapsed, and they pretty much stole $4 billion worldwide, and the crypto queen is still missing. So this one also gives a lot of bad connotations to the whole crypto market, but it's an interesting one because they used every dark pattern in the book, including ones like fake events and fake promotions and online meetings. And what's really scary is that there's still, and even though they went down in 2016 or whatever, there's still an active group that are still recruiting and selling and like, doing stuff, which is kind of crazy. So this leads to the last part of the talk is like, what can we do? Well, the I know it when I see it is the universal assessment criterion that I mentioned earlier. Well, I guess you just got to keep doing that even more, even if it's more difficult to use. That's about it. What can we do? The classic shame report game tactic. So Harry did this Twitter thing, and I don't really agree with the Twitter thing because it's like using a centralized application to shame. I mean, Twitter uses dark patterns too. So it's kind of sorry, my brother's calling me. So that's kind of like a lame tracker. But the one I kind of like the best is the tip line by Stanford Digital Civil Society. That one is like, yeah, report your patterns, you report things there, and it goes into research and things like that. Versus Harry's just goes into Twitterverse, which is like, no one does anything with that data. But at least this one will be tracking it, and you're seeing now more regulations happening. So they're the collection of all this time. So the other thing is a code of ethics for UX designers. It's like Tim was like, well, we should fix the designers. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard, but designers, education for them is always good, especially young UX designers, to inform them like what is the ethical design kind of thing. But most of the dark patterns are being pushed from other areas of the company, like marketing or executive leaderships. So as a UX designer, you don't have a lot of choices to go against that, or if you do, you might be, put on another project or forced to leave or whatever. So, but right now, education is the best, knowledge is power kind of thing. It's not the best solution. Also, can UX design have a code of ethics like the field of architecture? And it's like, I don't know if that's going to really work. That's, designers aren't really in a regulatory programs like architecture. It's not licensed. But anyways, there's a good manifesto by the group called IndieNet, and they have some really good talks about like some design ethics. They're great. Okay, from a design perspective, what can you do? Well, you can be more transparent when AI and machine learning is involved. When AI is used, it's like it's you have to clearly present that and why the things are happening, not just be like, well, it's just going to do stuff in the background. That's the way the Web 2.0 kind of works now, and I think that's not the best tactic. Me at the SingularityNET is we've been trying to say like if we're using AI, we say it, very clearly, like when something is processing, like the AI is processing your thing. So being more transparent with your patterns would be better, and not hiding what machine learning or AI is doing. And there's a thing down here below called smarter patterns. It's kind of interesting. They try to make a description of like how to design for AI a little better. So it's really a cool website. You should check it out. Some of it's pretty simple, or common sense, but it's a good reminder, and it's a good way to kind of use that as a basis to inform yourself, or maybe there's some tips or tricks there. The other thing is ID and detect new user patterns within flows and understand why they're doing that. Address it rather than just immediately blocking or obscuring it. So like a good example is for us, we built this airdrop, and we found that where airdrop is where users come in and collect free tokens or whatever, governance or whatever. But we found that we had to do it in series or certain periods of time. So there'll be multiple airdrops. But then we found that users would register, but they would only collect all the tokens at the end, at the second airdrop, rather than the first. Now, we allowed them to do that, but we also recognized that they were doing that. But we also warned them, and we figured out why. And we just had to figure out, it's like, why are they skipping the first airdrop and going to the second airdrop? Well, it's because they were collecting and they want to save gas on the gas costs. So what we did instead is we put a warning and say, putting the fear of God in them to, collect. We kind of just say, you can do that, but also maybe just warning that it will save you money on the gas, but just be careful not to miss your opportunities. So we just do the warning a little bit, but we kind of address it up front. Another thing we could do from the design perspective is allow users to express their do, think, and feel and say actions when they have these anxieties, rather than just like force actions or bug reporting. So it's just putting more feedback loops in there and gathering where they're feeling anxiety. Like when you're using AI or other things, it could be kind of apprehensive or people are questionable about that, especially with their like things like your money or health data or whatever. So that's from a design perspective. From a text perspective is algorithms can be made to detect these dark patterns. I think there could be more done. And a good example is a couple years ago, like Princeton researchers did do a scan of dark patterns and did all this stuff. It was really cool. But I was like, why don't we do that more? They obviously didn't like do it by hand. So they built an algorithm to scan. I think we could do more of that, more audit tools and services for tech and designers to detect dark patterns in their systems, at least in an audit way or in a way that, give them a more informed, like, oh yeah, well, we should try change some of that. So I think that could be increased. More objective open source consumer plugins or tools for detecting and educating users, kind of like ad blocker, but obviously ad blocker type thing would be a little difficult, but something that would help you consumers understand when something's happening that's like pretty much malicious, kind of not like a virus scanner, but it could be like just like a warning. But there was a cool project by some Germans, dark pattern detection project. I think we just need like more of that kind of stuff. And then to end on this is like, well, what about privacy regulation and other regulations? It's happening, it's slow, but it's not necessarily global, and it's addressing Web 2.0 more than it is Web 3. But it's cool. I mean, it's good that's happening. I just wouldn't expect that to change everything, but it's slowly putting like big companies like Amazon and Google and LinkedIn on a notice point where they have to be a little bit more cautious about what they're doing. So like an example is California passed a consumer privacy legislation that's pretty, doesn't have teeth. It's just more of like the warning that's coming. The U.S. has introduced the new Detour Act, which is also very interesting. And the Federal Trade Commission has done this like interesting. They basically labeled dark patterns in their literature. So the fact that the politicians and governments are kind of using the word dark patterns is kind of really interesting, that they're getting more serious about it. So we'll see, but I wouldn't hold my breath on it. And that's pretty much it for this quick talk about some dark patterns. I guess what we can do is do your questions and see if we can answer some of those real quick for you guys.
Thanks, Greg. That was such an awesome talk. I particularly like the history throughout. Like I remember watching Romeo and Juliet by Florence, so like that was blast from the past. So yeah, we'll head over to some questions and see what people have been asking.
Sure.
So is there any will among the companies to make a change in the dark patterns? After all, they get a huge benefit out of it. They may just enhance their techniques.
I mean, I think for the Web3 technologies, like they know they want to go, especially DAOs, for example, they want to be more transparent and have everything out. So they do want to change that. As far as the old technology, like, like Google, I think they're doubling down because they have their own AI, their own thing, and no one has that. It's not transparent what their AI is doing, and they don't need to be because they don't have any like force to do that. Unless like the people, are more aware of that and resist. But will they change? No, not the big companies. But I think what's interesting is the Web3 will, those companies can, because they're starting from a very small place and scaling this technology. And together, maybe if we uh, put more accountability or scan tools or more transparency as Web3 technologies get a little bit more open to the average person. Right now, you're just looking at you guys, which are a little bit above average when it comes to understanding how blockchain. A lot of people who are buying all these cryptos don't really know what it is, but they're early adopters, and these people could use more tools for transparency stuff that could
Absolutely.
kind of
Okay.
put the light on some of these dark patterns so that these companies wouldn't utilize them as much.
We've got a really good one here on how to hold designers responsible for their actions in Web 3.0 with the dark patterns.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of ways the designers are, involved with it, and sometimes they're being driven by the KPIs that they have to do. Uh, so how do you hold them responsible? Well, it comes from the leadership. It's going to come from the top. When with my team, we kind of look over that stuff, or I kind of do a scan for that on a leadership level. So would I expect a new designer to obviously raise their voices about it, but also if they don't know about it, my job as a design leader is to educate them, like, no, that's a dark pattern, that's misleading, and we have to go, have a talk about that and then kind of fix it.
So it should stem from the education. Like we should be working as preventative rather than, dealing with something after it's happened.
Right, yes. So it's a combination of both. You want to kind of like when you see it, I mean, because a lot of times it's an accident, and a lot, dark patterns are usually intentional, but sometimes they can be accidental in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for your time, Greg. It's been an absolutely amazing talk. I've definitely learned a lot myself. For everybody who's watching, thank you so much for your comments, for your questions. If you get out there on Twitter, definitely would be super helpful if you could tweet about everything. But Greg, again, thanks again. Once again, it was so good to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody who joined the thing. If you have any questions, you can just reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or whatever, or email if you wish. And yeah.
Awesome. Oh, and just one last thing. Our Easter egg hunt is still going. There hasn't been one confirmed winner yet. Nobody has got the correct answer. So if you are competing in the Easter egg hunt, there's still a chance to win the prize.
All right.
Awesome. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.